Looking all comfortable.
Exactly. You go for that.
Yeah.
You know everybody. And both of the guys in the room.
There was a lunch. Did you talk to Jonathan? He was going to show, right?
What?
Jonathan Lennox, he's going to show, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I saw him 6-7 minutes ago.
Okay. We'll just wait a few minutes. Just want to make sure.
There's only one agenda item.
We have a time in case.
There are interesting sessions going on in parallel. So.
Yes. Yeah, I was running with DNS over Steve. Also with the figures, but yeah. We need to do it as we have discussed it.
Yeah.
We can go do it at the draft next week too, so we just got that.
Mm-hmm.
So AT. Wherever you want.
I didn't think it until Thursday afternoon, I was going to have to be hunting for new room.
All right. All right. Welcome to Mmusic at IETF 100. So chaired today by myself and Ari, blast from the past here. So it's not on? I guess I got to get closer. Can you hear?
Yeah.
All right. So welcome to Mmusic IETF 100, chaired by myself, Fleming Andreasen, and Ari Karanen. Again, Bo couldn't make it this time. So Ari has kindly agreed to step in and help us out. Note well statement. I guess you're all familiar with that one. If not, please take a close look. Administrative stuff. We have the blue sheets circling around. I guess you guys know how that works, so we don't have to go over that. Getting help. We already have 2 note takers identified, so thank you for that. Need a Jabber scribe as well. Thank you, Jonathan. So we have that covered too. As always, when you speak, please make sure to use the microphone and state your name. We do have a remote participant, so using the microphone in particular is important. Otherwise, they can't hear you. Just a general request for people to please help out with document reviews. The energy level in the group is not all that high, and we've had several documents that we've gone through working group last calls on, and we have got very, very limited feedback from the group. In some cases, no feedback at all. We really need some participation, and even if you've looked at it and you don't have any comments, please just send a note to that effect. And keep in mind, if you don't review anybody else's documents, you're probably not going to get your own documents reviewed either, right? It's a two-way street. So just to please everybody, please spend a little bit of time on that. It doesn't take that long. Our agenda here today, introduction and status update. We'll just go over where the various documents are at and what it looks like in terms of the RTC web dependencies that we have. And then there's some open issues that have come up in simulcast. And some of them actually affect the RIT draft as well. So we only call out simulcast here, but it's really both simulcast and RIT that are being affected by this. That is the proposed agenda. Let me ask if anybody has any comments. on the agenda? I see none. So let's just continue into the working group status. In terms of published RFCs, we don't have any, but we got several documents that have now made it into the RFC editor queue, basically waiting for other normative reference documents to work their way through. So I think the good news here is that we're getting a lot closer to actually getting a lot of these dependencies resolved. We have 2 requests for publication right now. Actually, we only have 1. But it shows 2 right now. So, you know, RIT we submitted yesterday in the apparently very naive hope that we could move it forward that way. As the discussion today will show, you know, that was a little too optimistic. So that, I don't know if it already has been pulled back, but if not, it's being pulled back. Okay, it will be pulled back from that shortly, but hopefully it's just a very short and temporary setback while we discuss the issues here today and then get some updates in. Trickle-Eyes SIP, on the other hand, that should be fine. So that's moving forward. The ICE working group is moving forward with Trickle-Eyes as well. So we're seeing good progress there too. And we have the ICE working group co-chair here as well. So if anybody has any questions on that, I'm sure we can cover that. 4566 BIS, that is ready to move forward as well. That's just basically up to the chair, which is me, to get through review and a write-up, but we don't expect any issues there. So that's ready to move forward. In terms of working groups consensus documents, we have the data channel SDPNEC document, which the Shepherd did a review of and asked for some changes. And the author team on that document is virtually non-existent at this point, and they have agreed that they need help. So we are looking for a volunteer that can help move that document forward. I mean, it's essentially done at this point, but the authors just don't either have the cycles or the energy. So if anybody's willing to step up, we would greatly appreciate that. If not, I mean, SDPNEC, yeah, data channel SDPNEC.
Can I get back to you about after the meeting? I'll check out if I can do that.
Okay, Ronnie, you said you might be able to.
Because I think we have a dependency on that in Clue.
Okay. So sorry, Ronnie, are you volunteering or are you saying maybe?
Maybe let me just check.
Okay, that would be great. Yeah. Okay. Any other volunteers if Ronnie is not able to do that?
Krister, I'm available after bundle is done. That's all I can say.
All right, that would be fantastic. So anybody interested in SDPNEC, you know, make sure you don't put any roadblocks up for bundle is what I'm hearing. Yeah. All right, simulcast, we'll talk about that one today, but hopefully that should be moving forward pretty soon. ICIP SDP, there was one comment from the working group last call. We're still trying to get the author to respond to that one, but hopefully that won't require a whole lot so we can move that one forward. The working group last call has completed. And again, the corresponding specification in ICE 5245 BIS is essentially ready to move forward there as well. So we don't foresee any issues with that. And of course, we got bundle, which Krister is working his way through, addressing the last set of comments. There's been several pull requests that have been circulated on the list already. If you haven't taken a look at them, you know, please do. We working group last called this document several times already, so you know, hopefully we don't have to do that again. Yeah, please do take a look at those pull requests because we want to move this document forward sooner rather than later as well. Other working group drafts that are not on the agenda are already covered. MSRP usage data channel, same issue as with the data channel SDPNEC document. We need the data channel SDPNEC document first, so we haven't put a lot of emphasis on this one. But again, and I forgot to check actually whether this is an RTC web dependency or not. But if anybody's interested in, it's not. Okay. Okay. All right. So that might be less of an issue, but we are in the same situation. Essentially, the authors do not have time/energy to pursue this document right now. So if anybody's interested in moving this forward, we need somebody to help out a new author on this document. So I'll ask for volunteers here again, and, we'll repeat that request in the minutes as well.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Quick question. So was there some dependency that we should note in the notes on the MSRP draft? There were a few comments that I'm not sure I captured.
Andrew Allen, it's a FreeGPP dependency. It's on the FreeGPP dependency list. We have references to it.
Is there a date, a particular date that you want to see met for that?
Well, yesterday, it's release 14, which is a frozen release. So,
Okay.
But, I mean, it's not release 12, which is the baseline RTC web stuff. But,
So are you a stakeholder? Meaning, would you be willing to?
Not me personally, no.
Okay. All right.
So I think it's one of the companies that cares about this needs to provide a name.
Okay.
I think it's been a victim of the Alcatel-Lucent Nokia merger, basically.
Yeah, there has been some issues there. All right. Opportunistic negotiation. We are having some discussion with the authors right now and offline as to whether this document should have a proper offer answer considerations sections in it or not. I think that discussion is still ongoing offline, so we'll see what happens there. But we think hopefully that should be ready to move forward without too much further work, at least. Jonathan?
Yeah, wasn't there also some discussion that this and I've forgotten the name of the other working group, the SIP Brandy draft, which is basically the same thing.
Yeah.
Wasn't there some discussion of whether those two documents should be merged? I feel like there might have been, but I don't remember. And then I don't know what group would do it.
So we split it out of that other document. The issue is that SIP Brandy is not chartered to do anything normative. So instead of rechartering SIP Brandy, what we did was we sent some things to Mmusic. We could undo that, but we're just going in circles.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any problem. I mean, what working group does it? I just feel like they're being, I don't see that point in being two documents is not helpful to anybody, I think. I mean, I might say take the whole SIP Brandy document and throw it over here. But having some of it in that document, some of it in this document, splits up all like the instructions to people in a way that I think is not very clear.
Chris, yes, I don't really care if we have two documents as such, even though I would agree with Jonathan says. I'm the one who raised this, and my problem is really that none of the documents contain the offer answer. The SIP Brandy document is, first of all, it's an informative document, and the only thing it has is an example, an offer example or something like that. There are no offer answer procedures. And that draft, the SIP Brandy draft says, please look in this draft for the details. In this draft, there is nothing either, and this draft says, please look in the SIP Brandy for details. So I mean, I think it's a mess. I think because this is an Mmusic draft, we should have the offer answer the normative offer answer procedures in this draft. Whether SIP Brandy wants to keep the draft as an informative, blah blah, that's fine with me. But the Mmusic draft is what the implementer should be able to take in order to find out how to implement this. Thank you.
This is Ben Campbell. A little history on that and why that's a little bit problematic. I understand the request and I am not disagreeing with it, but the reason things are a little problematic that way is that the opportunistic security draft was intended as this is something you can do. Here are some examples of the things you can do with the existing standards to do opportunistic security. It was not intended ever to be a normative, here's how you do it, right? There's a distinction between here's some things you can do versus here's the right way, the standardized way to do it. And then in the process of doing that, of course, we discovered that in order to make this work, you got to be able to negotiate SRTP with an AVP profile instead of an SAVP profile. And so originally this draft was to do one thing, which was to make the proper update to say, yeah, it's okay to use SRTP with AVP. And now we're getting a little further down the role of specifying exactly how that's supposed to work. And we're bumping up against the original reason, which was to say, here's some things you can do as opposed to standardizing something. So I don't know what the right solution to that is. I'm in the process of trying to have some AD level discussions on figuring out how we want to go forward on that. If we, in fact, say that, yeah, let's go ahead and normatively state how we do the offer and answer and all that sort of thing, then some of these comments about the current separation of the documents are definitely worth thinking about.
All right. Thanks, Ben. I think that helps clarify the situation for now, at least. Any other comments from anybody on opportunistic negotiation? All right. Then we have the unknown key share draft as a working group draft now. I don't remember if it was in the previous meeting, but it's the 0.0 version at least. There were a little bit of a mix-up in terms of whether this was informational or standards track. It is standards track, and that should be indicated, at least in the milestone. I don't recall if the actual draft document has that on the title page right now or not. Then finally, we've had a couple of SDP Directorate slash designated expert reviews. You can see those on the bottom here. Nothing terribly controversial. Yeah.
Last one, the HTTP document I just checked is like over 300 pages. Do they actually expect us to review the entire thing?
Yeah. Could you please come to the microphone?
So I just checked the 3GPP document and it's over 300 pages and there's a lot of SDP stuff in it. And it's a nightmare to review that document. And is there a deadline or something for this?
So the document is already reviewed. So what happens actually is, sometimes it goes to the directorate, sometimes it goes to the designated expert, which is me.
Okay.
And in a case like that, typically what ends up happening is that we check the actual registration, which means that it has to be well specified, right? There are certain requirements for what it takes,
Yeah.
but we don't do an end-to-end review necessarily of the document to
There are a
vouch
lot
for.
of SDP examples that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. We don't typically do a review of those, not for a designated expert
So we
review.
just need to check the registration.
Yeah.
Is that what you were saying?
Yeah.
Then I can do that.
Yeah, that it's, well specified, right? That there is a grammar, that you have the right, definitions in there, and that you believe it is possible to come up with interoperable implementations based on what's in there.
Okay.
It's not a request for an end-to-end document review.
Okay, I can do that.
It's already done. It's registered.
Oh,
Yeah.
So you don't need a reviewer for the demo?
No,
Oh,
no.
okay.
But thank you.
Chris, question of clarification. I don't know if it belongs here, but since Ben is here, I ask. There was an email a few days ago, I think, by one of the art ADs who sent an email regarding the art directorate and that more reviewers are needed for there. And as one of the tasks of the art directorate, SDP was mentioned. So I'm just wondering, is there, how are those related?
We haven't talked about moving SDP Directorate type reviews into art. I can't speak for the future, but I don't think there's a plan for that right now. If there is a plan for that, no one told me. But that happens sometimes. We do not currently have a plan to move the SDP reviews into that. I would say that you can consider the historically RAI contribution to art to be the kind of thing that used to go to RAI art, which wasn't very often. We actually, do people know we had a RAI art? Most of you were on it.
All right. Let's move on just real quick to see where we stand in terms of RTC web dependencies and Mmusic. And I'd appreciate it if people could double check what's on here to see if anything looks incorrect or if anything is missing. I think the good news is that we're moving forward, and I think we see the light at the end of the tunnel here. There's a bunch of documents now that are at in the RFC editor's queue. Most of the documents are either in working group last call or getting very close to that. There might be, again, a few open issues in some cases. Bundle we talked about, right? That's being worked on right now. If we look at the dependencies, or should we say IDs that are currently holding up the various other drafts, all of these are essentially on a good path. So I'm not concerned about that, at least from a, should we say, holding up draft point of view. It's really just up to this group, I think, to just get our work finished. So, bundle we talked about already, simulcast, right? We had that on the agenda. We thought that was ready for a publication request. Hopefully it will be now within a couple of weeks after this meeting. RID, so, that gets pulled back now. So that will be in the same situation as simulcast. But again, hopefully it's just a matter of a few weeks before we get that one back there. ISIB SDP, again, we're just waiting to hear back from the author. There shouldn't be any issues there. There might be a minor update that's needed. We'll see what ends up happening there. Trickle ISIP, that's already publication requested. And that is essentially it. And I guess there is a question because we don't have, do we have SDPNEC? So maybe a question was, is SDPNEC, data channel SDPNEC, is that a dependency?
I checked the SDPNEC, it shows that I checked it to figure out, and I noticed that the only thing that in the data tracker, it says the draft Jennings RTC web depth mentions it, but that's all. There's no real dependency on the for the SDP neg in RTC web that I see. But there's dependency, for example, RFC 4566 bis has dependency on it also. So that's maybe like this the dependency, not.
So 4566 bis is a dependency for RTC web at this point, because we've talked about that one before, and previously it was not.
So it depends on the SDP neg one. At least that's what shows the data tracker shows.
Okay, so I see Cullen on Mead Echo. So I don't know if Cullen has any comments on either the 4566 bis dependency or the data channel SDP neg.
It also shows draft IETF Mmusic SCTP SDP as also has dependency to SDP neg. I don't know what type of dependency, but it shows dependency.
Yeah, that one is covered. Colin, go ahead, please.
Okay, so this area has been a source of huge confusion, and I think the various chairs have had many. I believe the current view is there are some documents that probably don't need to be dependent on that list as dependency already went through. And so when we get this whole cluster 238 thing, if we get the rest of the documents we need for cluster 238 there, and the IceBiz is not yet ready, then we will try and move all the dependencies so nothing depends on it. And the goal right now is as much as possible to make anything that doesn't need to depend on something shouldn't. So if you don't have to depend on the biz document, don't. Just use the baseline document. However, we may get there and realize that we do have a dependency, in which case we will. So the idea, and it may in fact not be the long pole in the tent. I mean, lots of the people, some of the authors that have said it will be done before some of the other stuff that is holding it up. So if that's the case, this just becomes a non-issue. And we've decided just to let the things flow through to the RFC editor queue and then sort them out there. That's my current understanding of where this whole mess is. But again, we shouldn't, unless your document has a technical reason it needs to depend on the biz document versus the non-biz document, it shouldn't. It should just reference the base document. And then it will get updated when the biz document replaces the base document.
And Colin, just for clarification and the note taker, so was that specifically on 4566 bis?
So like I'm looking at the dependency, like that, the RFC 4566 biz is the one that is the one problem child on this right now, right? Or is there other ones that are also a question?
So the other one we talked about previously was data channel SDP neg.
Yeah, so this is Magnus, but I checked the document. So the referenced file from RTC web that exists is to 45 bis, 566 bis, and bis points to the SDP neg ones due to this DCSA type of attributes. So that's why it's in 4566 bis. So
I cannot find any other WebRTC document that relies on the data channel SDP neg though. So like what document is it that depends on that?
It's the SCTP, the SCTP SDP.
Sorry, the audio dropped out because you said that wrong. I missed what you said.
Draft IETF and Mmusic SCTP SDP depends also, depends on that one. I don't know what dependency, but it shows it is dependent on the SDP neg.
So comment backing. So 4566 BIS depends on data channel SDP neg because it references the DCSA attributes. Why? Because what for in the IANA considerations, when you're registering new @s fields, they're one of the things you can register. So it has to reference the thing that says what you can register.
Sorry, can you say again what was the dependency there?
So 4566 BIS depends on data channel SDP neg and SDP mux attributes as the unfinished things. The reason it depends on data channel SDP neg is because it allows you to register new attributes, and one of the attributes you can register is the DCSA stuff, which is defined in the data channel SDP neg draft.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. Ali, since you're in the room as the primary author of 4566 BIS, that matches your understanding as well. There's no way of getting rid of that normative reference to SDP neg. Microphone, please.
I don't remember now why we put it there, but there must be a reason for it. And if we are able to move it to informative references, I can do that too. I need to check whether the text is eligible for that or not.
Okay.
Is it?
Hi, Colin Perkins. So the only reference to data channel SDP neg in 4566 BIS is in the IANA considerations, where it's talking about how you register new attributes. And it says, when you're registering a new attribute, you need to provide the following information, one of which is usage level, one or more of session, media, source, DCSA, or DCSA subprotocol. For a definition of source attributes, see RFC 5576. For a definition of DCSA attributes, see data channel SDP neg. And that's why it's a normative reference.
Yeah, no, I remember that now. Yep.
Magnus Westland. I don't find where any of the other WebRTC related documents actually reference 4566 BIS. So that might actually be a reference that disappeared, that did exist before but doesn't, because I can't find it. So this might not actually at all be a problem from the WebRTC perspective.
Christopher?
Chris, yeah, I've been looking into this, and in my opinion, I think the bigger issue than 4566 BIS is actually the ICE references. Because as far as I know, unless something has changed in RTC Web, the RTC Web, they directly reference the RFC 5245, but then they have other references to other documents that reference ICE BIS and ZIP, ICE, SDP, and so on. But, so indirectly, they're going to reference both. But I guess what Colin said was that it will be sorted out somehow, somewhere, sooner or later.
Right.
Because otherwise, it's going to be very difficult for RTC Web implementers to figure out, okay, what should I do? Because there are differences between ICE and ICE BIS, right? So, I mean, that's the whole reason we did ICE BIS to begin with, because there were things we wanted to fix and change or add or remove and so on.
Sure. I think from the chair's perspective here in Mmusic, right, the primary concern right now is to figure out how urgent is it that we get SDP neg finished or not. That's the primary concern.
Oh, this is Ben. I will still go ahead and address what Christopher was saying. The 80s kind of have a plan for that. I think the idea, and Adam has been the one tracking this, I think the general idea is that unless the draft is dependent upon something that's new, we can go ahead and reference the RFC, and then when all these things get released into the RFC editor queue, we're going to ask the RFC editor to go in and harmonize it all. I'm sure they will love us for that.
Colin Perkins, for the 4566 BIS, we could just take it out, and then in the data channel SDP neg, say this updates 4566 BIS.
Yeah. We would, yeah, we would probably prefer not to do that because 4566 BIS is essentially ready to just move forward at this point.
Sure. So the change to 4566 BIS would just be to take out the reference to the DCSA attribute. And then in the data channel thing, we say, you can also register these attributes, and we update 4566 BIS to allow it.
But isn't there something in 4566 BIS that talks about reworking the IANA registry, and that's why you have it in there?
And all that can still happen, I think, and we can just say, you know,
You just don't
it's been
explain why.
reworked, we just don't put that value in. And then the other document adds the value. But I mean, if you search for the neg draft, it only appears the once. So it's a trivial thing to take it out, as far as I can tell.
Okay. All right. Well, hopefully Ronnie will come through with SDP neg, and this won't be an issue. Yeah, that would be great. All right. That is it on the status update and RTC web dependencies. Anybody else have any comments or questions on that?
And Ronald, again, just to correct my comment, it's release 13 that the MSRP usage data channel draft is referenced in.
Okay. Yeah. All right, Magnus.
Okay, so let's talk about simulcast and read and the issues we found. So, okay, next slide. So, what really happened was that Fleming noted one issue, Jonathan noted another issue, and on the mailing list, and then we sat down and started discussing this in the beginning of this week, and we found a couple of other issues due to that discussion. So, trying to go through these to try to ensure that simulcast and read resolves these issues as needed, and we can go forward quickly so we can publish the documents. So let's go through the issues now. So take the next slide. So this one is what Fleming noted when he was doing a review for the pub request. So this is in the context that we had this discussion in the simulcast draft around some related format such as comfort noise or telephone events that you could switch to in some cases for media stream. And the current version of simulcast draft in section 5.2 says in such related format must not be defined as having their own read list, own read ID listed explicit in the attribute parameters, as they don't to simulcast streams. Yeah, Fleming noted is problematic, and then looking back to it, I think the authors agreed that this looks problematic. So let's go to the next slide. Really, any type of this definition of what you would do with any type of special handling should really belong to in a Mmusic read document to begin with. So, and they also there are actually alternative representation of the media source. So even if that's why I think was the wrong assumption before. And therefore, you would specify them as alternatives PTs for a particular read. So you would have maybe, for example, an audio codec and a telephone event. You could actually send them, or comfort noise with G711 if that's those together is actually a restriction on a particular, from a simulcast perspective, a particular set of restrictions. So I'm saying. So therefore, and there were also this existing text in section 4 of Mmusic Read, which is the old one there, that already said that you list one or more PT values that can be used in the associated RTP stream. So the proposal here to fix this issue is to remove the sentence that we noted about, well, it must not include related payload formats in the semiconductor draft, and tighten up the definition in RID. So that's the bold text here in the new version, is to try to clarify that you're not allowed to send in. You need to list the payload types if you're using the payload type list to begin with. If you're using it, you need to list the subset of payload types that may be used to represent that particular restriction. So that's the suggestion. So that's why the bold additional sentence there in the bold text. So, any comments on that? Seems not. Let's move on to the next issue then.
Yeah, so for the note taker, right?
Yeah.
It sounds like there are no objections or concerns with that proposal. So
Yeah, and I should note that, I mean, Adam is not here. He has a conflict, but he has seen this before in a comment and etc. And this basically happened with everything except the last issue, where I think I provide his view on this. So, in my interpretation. So, this second thing was the thing that we discussed. This previous thing, we did notice there are actually difference for how you signal, for example, red, which has its own payload type. And then it has one or more payload types that you express as being for the redundancy encoding. So, for example, you can have 97 payload type 97 as red, G711 and G79, and then you can say, oh, this redundancy packing of the codex is G711 plus time delay G79, and in that case, there's actually a difference. If you would specify read line between sending alternative 1 there, saying just PT97, which means we will only say send red encapsulated payload to you. And the second one, where you can say, oh, this media stream will either be in red, or it could be G711 or G79. So there's a clear difference. And I think the proposal here is to actually write a sentence or two, or as I exemplify this into the redraft, as saying this is what, basically in the context of the previous change. After that, say, okay, this applies to examples like read, etc., where there's already a difference between these two. So, but that text proposal hasn't been written yet. So, but that's so we can't show it. But the intention here is to write this up as an actual text proposal and send it to the list as soon as we can. Well, neither. We are just making clear that there's a difference between if you stating for a codec that might have, you need on the M line those all those payload types, but if you could only include one and then you're actually restricted to read, which is saying that what's going on the read line is the payload types actually sent as payload types in the RTP header, so to say, of the media, of the RTP streams, source streams you're sending.
Right. So you don't need to specify the payload. So if you're using one there,
yeah,
then you'd have an FMTP line for payload type 97, which mentions a bunch of other payload types that are not mentioned in the RID.
Yes, exactly.
And that doesn't break anything.
Yeah, exactly. Just clarifying that so people understand okay, they might, so this is an example of something that we could have it also with other formats which has associated formats, which is represented as payload types and might actually show up as encapsulated in some form in your stream.
So point one is actually you can only send the red format, but it will then specify what is sent inside it.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And so I think I would say it is you can't just naively replace the contents of the grid line with wherever you put used to put the contents of the M line in your code, because you still need to use the actual M line for a bunch of stuff in your code.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and that's why I think we need a clarification, because there are differences here, and you need to think about this. So it seems to be a worthy clarification, at least towards the interpretation of the specification. So okay. Any disagreement about that? It seems not. No, only you. Okay. So we will propose text for this to the list and. So, yes. someone in the author team is going to propose text. So. So yes, in section 4 of the read draft, there's this text that's quoted here, and it says must support and use repaired RTP stream ID as items. So the issue with using repaired RTP stream IDs is that this doesn't fit to redundancy formats that reference multiple source streams, multiple different SSRCs in RTP, which includes FlexFec. So we need to put in some type of exceptions for these kind of redundancy formats. So if you have a one-to-one one, it's fine to require to use repaired RTP stream IDs, but otherwise you need to say, okay, there are exceptions to other formats that can't use this mechanism as it requires a one-to-one mapping between the reads to source streams, etc. So, yeah. Repaired stream ID points to read. The read needs to point to one single SSRC or RTP stream represented by one SSRC, and if it's doesn't is the right for the repair format, then it can't be used, basically. So we need to change the text. So if you go to the next slide, we have a text proposal here for noting this banking exception and saying that this must is when it's applicable, and make clear, for example, that the FlexFec is one case where it's not applicable due to the reason that it references multiple RTP streams. Or actually have a mechanism on RTP level that fully specifies this. So yeah, we might wordsmith it, but it's
I agree, and I also wanted to point out that FlexFec is already in the bundle 238 dependency, so this doesn't slow us down at all. That's in the big picture.
No.
And I think it should just be informative. Anyway.
This is an informational reference anyway, so it's just an example of something that does this. So, but I assume it will come out in the same time as the rest of the cluster, the big part of cluster 238 that remains. So, okay, any objections to going this direction and fixing this issue? Silence.
All right. So for the note taker, I guess people are in general agreement with this, but a little bit of wordsmithing is required.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Another issue we kind of realized when we were discussing this. So when you're using redundancy formats like RTX or ULP-FEC, as I discussed before, we have this kind of reference chain between the repair stream ID points to reads, the reader is bound to an SSRC, and your repair stream, and the repair stream is bound to the repaired stream ID. And because this is level of indirection, something can go wrong. Actually, if you go to the next slide, you could have so if the repair stream at the bottom reference source A for repair at the different points it's sent, that's fine. But then if you have a change in what the read points between SSRC A and SSRC B, and you haven't really received it, so you missed it, the repair packet might wrongly point to SSRC A and try to use that while it's in actually should have used SSRC B. So, and when it gets the updated read pointed to B, it will actually use the right packets, but this can actually happen. So, so there's a risk for this misassociation when you do using dynamic reassignment of reads between SSRCs. So, next slide. There are actually risk of this happening in some sense with if you would switch along the midlines between conceptual sources and RTP middle boxes. if you actually want to notice, it would affect bundle, I think, because it's bundle that needs to make that reflection in itself. But I don't know how we feel about that. Otherwise, the issue around these documents really to focus on documenting the issue in Mmusic grid, and one way around this to avoid this issue is, of course, to not depend on this level of indirection and instead use FlexFX that directly points to the stream, and you will never have an issue because it references the packets by SSRCs and sequence numbers, and the problem is solved or completely voided. So, but this is also text we haven't written yet, which needs to be suggested and sent to list. So, yeah, and that means, so the suggestion here is really not to do anything about bundle, but the issue would kind of potentially exist there also. But if you use the RTP, it might be, yeah, it might not manifest itself as clearly there, because the stream is actually bound to the whole M lines, and any stream at any change should contain their own mids in the header extension and therefore be correctly associated for the use. So it probably less problem there than it is for this mechanism. That's actually may depend on this level of indirection. Yeah, okay, from the redundancy mechanism perspectives, yes, that might be true, but it shouldn't rely on mid in that case, should it?
Actually, thinking about it more, I'm actually thinking this actually might be a problem even in non-bundled, if you ever change SSRCs. So maybe this is something that's been around forever. I'd only just noticed it.
I don't think you just noticed it. It's just that we don't have enough problems.
Well, it's the problem of having a repair flow with a different SSRC and then changing the SSRC of the primary.
But in most cases, we have used other binding mechanisms that hasn't been relying on these labels. So that's why I say it might not actually be an issue here, because for
Colin Perkins, I mean, the RTX payload format has been broken all along.
Yeah, it's usually really abstract.
It has only worked because people have been using RTP in restricted ways.
Yeah.
And we pushed back against it at the time that was specified, and well, it worked for the way people were using SIP at the time, therefore no one was interested in fixing it.
Yeah.
And I mean, ULP also has problems, although for different reasons. So yeah, I mean, yes, it's a known problem and it's coming back to get us.
Yeah. Yeah, but FlexFX does solve it. So
yes, so don't use RTX is the solution.
Yeah, and through this we will actually have a documentation of the issue in some form in general, with one existing documentation list. So yeah. So focus is Mmusic grid and recommend our FlexFX as a way of avoiding it, or similar mechanism that has explicit indication of SSRCs of what's they repair, and you get away from the problem. So any objections against the proposed way forward here?
All right, for the note taker, looks like we're good.
Yes. We also realized in the simulcast draft that the SDP examples in there might not be the particularly complete. They're also both not using read in multiple different ways. That might be worth it. It also doesn't contain particularly much about redundancy related formats. I did note when I actually looked a bit deeper that the RTC Web's SDP example draft actually has fairly much more detailed examples with simulcast, and I actually need to go read them properly and review them. But we might actually be able to steal parts from there also, but and in the same way of actually verifying those SDP examples. But the plan here is, as authors, that we anyway revising the document is to put in at least one more example that's a bit more advanced. So,
John, I think in addition to an example that's more advanced, I think a lot of the examples are kind of unchanged from our old approach of doing payload type based simulcast. And so I feel like switching to most examples should only use RID, and not, payload types at all.
Yeah.
Because,
Yeah.
it probably would be a better.
But I think we still need some that use payload types.
Yeah,
but
obviously, one of
yeah.
one of the things you can do,
Yeah.
simulcast on is payload types.
Mhm.
But there's also, so like for instance, the things where you've got like payload type scope image adder, which is the only place you specify the sizes of the simulcast streams, is clearly not what we want people to do.
No, except that's what 3DPP is doing it, but yeah.
I don't care.
Yeah.
That was because they chose what to do before we changed our mind about what we were doing.
Yeah. Yeah. So. Yeah, but I agree. We need to modernize the examples to what the full intention of RID provides for simulcast. So that's another thing for us authors to write up. Any more comments?
Just take a question clarification. You may take the examples, but we're not going to add a reference to that draft.
No. We're just going to sort of copy paste the relevant part that we want in example. I don't want a full WebRTC STP in my examples in simulcast either, because it's too much junk. So.
All right. So for the note taker, what I believe I heard was agreement with the recommendation here, but also per Jonathan's comments. I don't know if you want to modify one of the existing examples to not be purely payload type based.
I think modify one and add one is the kind of things that ends up being doing. So we modify one of the existing ones to use image restrictions, for example.
Yep.
And then we probably add one which contains redundancy, a few other things together with that. So. Yeah, Niels.
After having reviewed the RTC Web SDP examples, and they're more like broader than what's in that draft, I think it would be good to have it either the same level or less in the SDP examples. This was like confusing to me because I was like, what the heck is this RTC Web examples thing doing? Because I don't see it actually in the draft, and then I had to talk to people to find out that.
That's probably why that's probably an indication that we actually need to move up the examples in the simulcast draft to levels so people understand. Yeah, these kind of advanced things is possible, and that's so. And we can focus discussion in the simulcast draft on actually providing the guidance to how do you read this thing and what's worth thinking about in it. So, okay.
All right. So again, for the note taker, should make sure that one of the examples is advanced to the same level as what we have in the RTC Web SDP examples draft.
Okay. Next issue. Yes. So this is Jonathan's comment that went on the mailing list a few weeks back. I think 2, maybe. So, any comment on one paragraph in section 5.1 around source-specific signaling, and this sentence really is not really clear what it tries to say. I think we have had several different interpretations of it, which shows it's confusing. But and I think my reflections over is that in general, ASSRC and ARIDs are kind of independent. I mean, you can use ASSRC when you actually can use them to put up information about specific sources you're sending when you're creating an SDP offer or an answer. There exists some possible inferment between RID and ASSRC by using payload types. If you have unique payload types pointing to particular and they are reflected in the ASSRC lines, but that's really not likely to occur because the only AFMTP line source-specific parameters that exist so far is parameters for H.265 payload format. So it's not likely to be used in that sense of binding it. So what's currently is that they are independent. So the suggestions here is to remove this paragraph from simulcast draft and it's not obvious that it actually needs a clarification in the redraft around this, but so I think the easiest way was just to leave it alone, but here you might have other ways. If you see some issues around completely removing it, maybe have some clarifications, but that's a question for the group if you have any input on this.
Ronnie Evans, since it came before, I started the comment that you
Yeah.
cannot know from the SSRC to relate it to a tell or dot, then I'm okay with removing that. I didn't like this text in the first place. You just modified it a bit, but
Yeah.
for me, it's okay to remove the text.
Okay, good. So then we came to issue number 7, which, well, we should summarize. So seems to be my take at least seems to be consensus that we can remove it and we don't need to add any new text on the general usage that the existence of ASSRC and read can be are mostly orthogonal or anything like that. It's just okay. They're both mechanisms. Normally, unless specifying anything more, they will be two separate mechanisms that may occur in the same SDP. So. No, exactly.
No, no taker is clear.
Ronnie Evan, we're just hoping that people understand the limitation of A equal SSRC. That's all.
Yeah. So, yeah. So, issue number 7. So this also came up in discussion, was actually about, so is there, so let's level up. So mid values that you used in this context may be is actually implicitly bind to ASSRC lines if they exist, because they are included in the same media description. So the same in equals block. If you have the ASSRC lines there and you have the A equals mid, you would know the mid value. So.
Yeah, Jonathan, this is the whole thing we went through, whatever it was, a few months ago about the appendix to bundle, which defines the routing of received packets based on various things.
So now the question that actually came up in our discussion was, so read doesn't have this feature parity. What we have is the RTP, RTCP level mechanism to bind reads to SSRCs. They are required because ASSRC signaling clearly doesn't work in cases where you have dynamic switching back and forth. You also have this kind of signaling race condition that if the answerer includes a new ASSRC, and you have an established RTP session, the media may reach the client prior to the signaling message, which binds them. So we clearly need the existing mechanism already. So that's the question is, so building enabling an ASSRC mechanism for indicating the read values for a particular ASSRC in those cases where it can be used is a possibility. And it will also have some restrictions on how to change the read value and the SSRC binding. However, so that's kind of what would be possible. But next slide. So what we really want to have is discussion at all if this is motivated, and if so, where would you specify it? I think we should start with if it's motivated at all to specify this mechanism. So because I think that's the important question. So Colin.
Hi, Colin Perkins. What happens if you get an SSRC collision? Does that break anything?
You have the previous ASSRC mechanism and signaling rechange, etc., which would happen anyway if you use it today without binding it to RID. So if you include ASSRC, you already have this. Normally, your two pairs, and the first part to declare is SSRCs, then you can include your SSRCs as non-colliding. So normally
but you can still get collisions even with signaled ones, and you may still have to change.
Yeah, but
and it works in those cases.
Yeah, in worst case, you have to say, oh, I switched my previous SSRC that was colliding to this value instead, and do another signaling round.
Okay, and nothing breaks too badly while while the signaling is racing the new SSRC use.
I mean, media is unlikely to work during that collision, so so I mean that's why. I mean, there are several reasons why the RTP level mechanism has advantages, but
Basically, whatever is happening here is exactly the same as happens with mid. If mid is broken, that's probably a bigger deal. Yeah, exactly. The idea is this is essentially the entire mechanism. It's exactly the same mechanism as mid, just one level down.
Mm.
We have Colin in the queue.
Yep, Cullen. If the
So-
chairs press the button.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. I'm just not sure I'm really following this problem. I mean, this mostly seems like, yeah, there's certain situations where, yes, in that packet with a new SSRC, you need to signal the RID in it, or else things don't work. But we knew that from the beginning. I guess I'm not getting what the problem is.
It's actually only a question of feature parity with being able to signal in those cases that you want to use ASSRCs. So that's only the question. We have a mechanism that's sufficient to make all the cases we can think working, but you would not get the ASSRC binding to RIDs until the media start flowing. So you get it through RTP, RTCP.
I see. Okay, well, I mean, I
Yeah.
guess this is a case. I mean, I see what you're saying, but who would use that and when? I can't think of when I would ever use that.
Mazzanati, I can clarify some of where some of where this came from, and channel some of Adam's objections to it, and maybe try to resolve what what the pros and cons were. So originally, besides just having symmetry or parity with what's available for mid, which is not really a need. It's just a cleanliness thing. I don't think there's actually a use case where this is required for something to work. So from that sense, it's not a need. But one of the other things that came up as a motivating use case for it is moving specifically Chrome to a unified plan. Chrome currently signals a bunch of A equals SRC lines to indicate simulcast in a very non-standard way, and moving them to signal simulcast properly, but yet still have backwards compatibility with the older implementations, which are using the A equals SRC variant of signaling simulcast. Providing the RID binding to that A equals SSRC seemed like a natural transition to moving to unified plan, because then you could say that this A equals SSRC is the 720p, high resolution layer with RID 1. And they could say A equals SSRC, the next one is the lower resolution layer, 360p with RID 2. So it seemed a natural way to evolve Chrome from using hard-coded SSRCs with implicit knowledge that these are different resolutions to being explicit about these are different resolutions. So Adam's counter to that was, why would we need this interim transition step? Why wouldn't they just go to the proper unified plan, which uses simulcast? The A equals simulcast line is what tells you which RIDs are which, are the two different simulcast resolutions. And you don't need these two different A equals SRC lines to tell you that there's two different resolutions. The simulcast line tells you that there's two different resolutions with two different mid bindings. So from that sense, you wouldn't need that transition period. Just go straight to the unified plan simulcast syntax and not need this. So the only real use case of this that would provide any benefit that remains would be to prime a decoder pipeline before it gets the first RTP packets, to already be able to set it up and let it know that here comes the SRC and it's this resolution, and you can create your decoder instance with these maximum frame sizes and things like that, which is a pretty small motivating use case. And I guess my view on all of this is that I've kind of been convinced that it's probably not enough of a motivation to require a new specification for it, and just leave it out, leave it alone, and don't require people to do that, and let Chrome go directly to unified plan and not have an interim stage.
Yeah. Before you go away, Mo, wait. I have a question. Will not adding extra additional A equals SSRC anyway screw with Google's implicit simulcast scheme? I don't know enough about how they actually.
What they do is they just put the number of A equals SRC lines is the number of simulcast streams.
Yeah, and you need addition. To my understanding, you can't have several different that type of attributes on the same A equals SSRC. So you need to repeat the SSRC several times if you would do this, because you wouldn't have to have one which says,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes. Oh, yeah. I mean, different A equals SSRC with different SSRCs.
yeah,
Each SSRC, different
Yeah.
SSRC you see, that's a different simulcast stream.
yeah. So it's might actually anyway clashes a little bit with their implementations, depending if they only had one SSRC before, it still might not be well supported. But that's just, yeah, I guess from my point of view. So it's
Jonathan, so two things for me. It was not so much what is Chrome going to do, what is Chrome itself going to do, so much as can I, as a basically translate Chrome's weird dialect of SDP into something closer to standards conformant that the other side can understand, and vice versa. Because, obviously, if Chrome isn't speaking the RID header extension or RTCP, then it needs the SSRCs to do anything useful. The other thing, the question is for mid, are there? Obviously, for bundle, you can do bundle with never sending an A equals SSRC by just relying entirely on the header extension and RTCP.
Yeah.
But people are sending it anyway, and is that just for compatibility with older systems, or is that they would say, okay, I'd rather pre-bind than spend the bits in the media plane on the header extensions and whatnot? Because if there's actually the latter motivation, then presumably they have the same motivation. They might have the same motivation for RID as well. I'd rather not spend the header extension bits. And it depends whether you have other header extensions.
Yeah. So, from my perspective, there's one thing here which priming the whole decoder chain is possible. The only thing that's outstanding is this RTP2, so the RTP stream binding into that rest of the decoder chain, because you will gonna know from the simulcast line and the RIDs what the requirement is on the decoder chains you're gonna have to set up. So you can prime them, have them up and ready. The only thing you need to do late is say, okay, oh, here we have a new SSRC. Oh, it indicates RID 1. Then we should connect this RTP stream to this particular decoding chain.
Yeah, and you have to spend the bits on. You do have to spend the bits on the header extension, which if you're doing something low bit rate, maybe you don't want to.
Yeah, but that's only the initial that you really need to have, especially if you're not having dynamic changes.
Mosinati, one more thing, one more potentially motivating use case that came up, which I think we did not discuss with Adam, because maybe we thought it was better left unsaid.
Now you're there saying it.
But I'm going to say it just for completeness. So I think something related to what Jonathan just said about implementations that don't actually send mid on the wire in RTP, but yet signal, in signaling, you know what the mids are. And so that's enough to resolve all of your RTP stack, instances. You don't actually need the mid on the wire in those cases. You could do the same thing with RIDs with this binding, that you could declare your RIDs in the SDP and never send them on the wire, so that a middle box which was not on path, a middle box which was only on signaling path and not on RTP media path, could actually signal the mids and RIDs and even manipulate them if it wanted to, even if it could never see or inject them into the RTP path. I don't know if we want a topology like that called out and supported, and it seemed like it probably had a whole whole rat's nest of corner cases that would break or cause more issues. So I think it's probably not a strong motivating use case to need RID bindings.
You're actually going into the case where I'm kind of fearless that people might wrongly think that they can live without the RTP, RTCP level mechanisms for this and try to implement it. So,
Cullen asked in the job room if there's anyone from the Chrome team here. I don't think there is, but I just wanted to make sure there wasn't somebody I didn't recognize.
It's Omer, just for the record. Firefox sends MIDs in RTP now. And the RID stuff is in the latest Chrome, I think. And we're
people are moving to the already specified solution.
Yes, and we're planning to basically upstream the MID in the RTP as well.
Okay.
So hopefully this whole mess should be over soon.
So okay, good. So I think that takes us to the question. I haven't really heard it. So I need to ask Sefik explicitly, is there anyone who really thinks this we should do? Because so far we've been neutral to negative. Okay.
It was my suggestion, and I feel like it's architecturally cleaner to have it, but if nobody agrees with me, I'm not going to fuss about it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and as I noted about, there is a possibility to specify this later. It's just that you would have to work a little bit more if you actually want to include it. It's go change some other specification if you want to mandate it, for example, from RTC web perspective or things like that. But that's so. But you can always specify new source specific FMTP parameter, or saying this is an STS item basically for use with ASSRC. So a separate document later could easily fix this if we see more need for it. But from my perspective, I think we can conclude. I think it's rough, but it's the rough consensus seems to be to not do it. So
yeah. So for the note taker, I think the chairs, we're hearing the same thing. So yeah, it's not motivated. Do not do it. It's not motivated right now.
Yeah. On this issue, yes.
Correct.
Okay. So I think that was So the goal here, now that we've gone through the issues, I think we have clear directions on how to proceed. The author team will work on providing text for the not yet written in the near time. I hope by doing it already next week to get it on mailing lists. And then after bickering a few about the text, we'll hopefully have publication version in a few weeks of both simulcast and read. And I would guess that because these changes actually changes mandatory normative text and things like that, we do have we are removing must not or changing a must sentences and adding another must not, etc. So I assume we need a targeted last call on these particular changes. So and this guy disagrees. No, but so. I don't want to thunder through my.
I'm just getting away from the window. No, this is Ben. I would say the answer to that depends on the chair's assessment on whether everyone understands the proposed changes and has a consensus to do it. Yeah. If you assess that that is the true state, you don't necessarily have to re-last call it, but that's the chair's prerogative to decide.
Yeah. Let's write up the text and then you can decide.
Sounds good. I think that was it, right?
Yeah.
For you?
Yep.
All right. That's all we had on the agenda. So unless anybody has anything else. Ronnie?
Yeah, I can be the editor for the document. It's okay.
Yeah, you're willing to sign up for the data channel STP now?
Yeah, that's
Great.
okay.
Thank you very much. Clap too soon there, Ben. All right. Going once? All right. Thank you very much, everybody. See you next time.
Just make sure.
communicate you on Twitter, actually. There's one guy that responds to email.